Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. Today we will be listening to the 7th part of What If Deku Became a Vigilante. If you enjoy, please consider liking, commenting, and subscribing down below, and don't forget to hit that bell icon so you get notified when videos go live. Now, without further ado, let's get into the video. Chapter 21, Cavalry Battle. Our next event is the Cavalry Battle. Midnight cracked her whip again, getting the attention of the crowd. You children will be forming teams of 3 to 4 people, in order to collect these headbands, representing points. You'll be choosing one rider, and you'll be eliminated if the rider ever touches the ground. Points will be assigned based on the place you got in the obstacle race, ascending by 5, with the exception of 1 million points for first place. Izuku felt a chill go down his spine, as all 41 of his competitors eyed him up like chopped liver. You have 5 minutes to choose your teams. Midnight cracked the whip again. Go. Izuku watched as everyone fled from him, mingling with everyone else. Surprisingly, Kaken came up to him and punched him in the arm. Stop looking like a kicked puppy and find a team, nerd, he said. I can't kick your ass in the finals if you don't make it there. Izuku rolled his eyes. Alright. Go find your team then. Having apparently done what he set out to do, Kaken wandered away. Izuku snorted, turning around and shaking his head. Classic Kaken. He turned and found Shinsu wandering over, holding out his fist. Gen Ed kids should stick together. Besides, you're crazy enough that I don't want to be on a team against you. Izuku grinned, giving him a fist bump. I'm gonna take that as a compliment. You're always welcome here. Broccoli-kun. Hatsum bounded over, zooming into his face. You're in first place. Yes, I am. Let me be on your team. Hatsum shouted, wringing her hands. You'll be in the spotlight so much, and it'll be great press for my babies. Izuku leaned over when she pulled out a suitcase from somewhere. Show me everything. Hatsum started pulling things out. Rocket boots, a fucking jetpack, a high-powered fire extinguisher. The plan was slowly coming together in his mind. I have an idea for our last person. Izuku stood up, and he looked over to see Uraraka coming over to them. Hi Izuku. She waved, looking a little nervous. Can I join your team? Just the person I was thinking of. She yelped as he grabbed her arm, bringing her into the group. They all huddled together, bumping shoulders. So I'm gonna take that as a yes. Yeah, you're on the team now, Izuku said with a grin. Does everyone here know sign language? Yeah. Hatsum said excitedly. Sometimes my babies have sound components, so I need to test them in silence. Yeah, my grandma is hard of hearing, Uraraka said, a little more sure of herself. Good. Izuku switched to sign, keeping his hands between their bodies and away from prying eyes. Here's the plan. Hitachi couldn't really register that this was real. He was the rider, a jetpack strapped to his back and a fire extinguisher in his arms. Midoriya held most of his weight, being in the back and also physically the strongest out of all of them. Uraraka was in the front, mostly responsible for just removing their weight, and Hatsum was on the other side of Midoriya. Both Midoriya and Hatsum had one rocket boot for maneuverability, and they had fucking flamethrowers. Even after going up and getting the headband tied around his forehead, the plan still seemed insane. But then again, he did decide to team up with the craziest person, so he really shouldn't be surprised. 3. Uraraka grunted, her face already looking a little pale, which didn't really bode well. 2. Hatsum adjusted one final thing on his jetpack, before slapping his back and taking position. 1. Midoriya shifted underneath him, taking most of his weight. Go. Everything seemed to explode. The teams rushed them, and Midoriya shouted now. Then they were weightless. That's it? I'm going to kill him. Hitachi just barely managed to keep himself from screaming, just barely managing to hold onto the fire extinguisher he was given. It really seemed unfair that the two gremlins got the flamethrowers and he only got the fire extinguisher. He registered Yamada-sensei's voice but not any of the words, as his brain was still processing the fact that he was in the air. Why did I agree to this? He shouted. Because it's a brilliant idea. Midoriya cackled, sending them farther and farther up. Incoming. Hatsum shouted. They jolted to the left, and Hitachi heard a muffled die, followed by explosions. He heard the sound of the flamethrowers going off and maniacal cackling, and he heard Bakugo shout, "What the who let him have a flamethrower?" "I did," Hitachi shouted, taking the opportunity he presented. "What are you gonna do about it?" "I'm gonna kill dash." The angry Pomeranian was cut off as the mind control took hold. "Leave our team alone," Hitachi commanded. Bakugo started falling to the ground, and he could feel when Bakugo broke out of his control. And could hear it too, judging by the very angry swearing. They were still getting bombarded by attacks from the enemy, although no one was as bold as to send their rider up like Bakugo. Hitachi filtered out the madman underneath him, instead choosing to focus on securing their front. "You think that's good enough?" he shouted, while spraying the fire extinguisher. "Tape won't do anything to my babies." Hatsum shouted, right alongside Midoriya, who shouted, "I've got a flamethrower." Suddenly they started to wobble. "Fuck you, Neozane," Hatsum shouted. Hitachi risked a glance over to see a girl with horns, carrying a guy he recognized as Aoyama from Midoriya's rambling, sticking her tongue out and flipping them off. "What's going on?" Hitachi shouted back. It was hard to talk without shouting. "Neozane's quirk is EMP pulse generation," Hatsum responded, shooting off the flamethrower to burn some purple balls. "She's knocked out the hover boots. We've got to land, we're sitting ducks up here," Midoriya shouted back, fending off a net. "But we're the target on the land," Yurika shouted from the front. "It's the best chance we've got." Midoriya kicked off the hover boot, probably beaming some poor soul in the head. "Let's do it." Hitachi braced for impact, feeling the entire shudder through his body as they landed roughly on the ground. Immediately they started sinking into the ground. "Lift off a little bit, get us out of here," Hitachi obliged, wildly spraying the fire extinguisher around to mask what they were doing. They managed to pull themselves out of the mud, but not before they were assaulted by the same team that grounded them in the first place. He barely dodged a laser to the face, ducking underneath a bird that flew at his head. "Were you planning on killing me?" "Oh, non-mons." Hitachi's quirk kicked in. "Leave our team alone." The next few minutes went by in a blur of spraying his fire extinguisher and using his quirk. A migraine was starting to build up behind his eyes, and he could only thank those 2 weeks of quirk training with Midoriya for the fact that it was only starting to hurt now. With 1 minute left, Team Yaoyorozu shakes things up by enclosing Team Shinsu in an icy arena. Hitachi shivered, as he watched the other team. A girl he recognized as Yaoyorozu was the rider, and Izuku was in the front, with 2 people he recognized as Todoroki and Tokoyami were in the back. Suddenly he was thankful for all the times Midoriya rambled about whatever 1A classmate he was stalking instead of doing the group project they were assigned. "Remember the plan, stay defensive," Midoriya shouted. Hitachi nodded to himself, hoisting up his fire extinguisher. He won't let some hero student brats take their victory. Up. Hitachi turned on the jetpack, and they went up a couple feet just as ice froze the floor. They would have been sitting ducks otherwise. They were rushed, and it was only a bright tower of flame from Midoriya that kept Tokoyama's quirk at bay. "Is that all you got?" Hitachi shouted, looking for any thread for his quirk to take hold. Surprisingly, or maybe Hitachi just tuned this part of Midoriya's ramblings out, the quirk talked back. "Don't talk about Fumi that way." Hitachi's quirk took effect. "Drag your team away from us." The quirk grew bigger, latching onto the 2 back team members and dragging them away. "No, Dark Shadow. Free yourself of the darkness you've been trapped within." He sprayed the fire extinguisher around, fending off the other team. "You really think you can handle the darkness?" Tokoyami was about to respond, but there was another column of ice rushing them, and only the combined force of Hatsum and Midoriya's flamethrowers, plus an evasive maneuver from Hitachi got them to safety. 10 seconds left on the clock. Todoroki's really gunning for the first place headband. Engine recipio burst. Everything seemed to happen at once. He counted 3 sources of fire, a shadow that seemed to block out the sun, and a hand reaching out. All of a sudden, Hitachi was left with no headband on his forehead, and the creation girl was holding their headband in her hand. "And that's time. They have no points. You know you're not getting this back, right?" Izuku asked Hatsum, gesturing with the flamethrower still in his hands. "Of course. Go ahead and keep the baby." Hatsum grinned, pushing her goggles up on top of her head. "How can you guys be so cheerful? Shinsu groaned from where he was lying face down on the ground. We have nothing. No points. 0. Uraraka spoke up. We actually do have points. Everyone looked over at her, and she held up a headband. I managed to snag this from Yayorozu's neck. And here's the scoreboard. Midnight got everyone's attention with the crack of a whip. First place, Team Yayorozu. Second place, Team Bakugo. Third place, Team Monoma. Fourth place, Team Shinsu. We made it! Uraraka shouted, jumping up and tackling Shinsu in a hug. His other friend made an agonized noise that sounded like a gargle, but didn't pull away. Broccoli-kun. We did it! Hatsum jumped up and down, and she high-fived Izuku. My babies are gonna get so much attention. Izuku and Shinsu grinned at each other. Just cause we made it this far doesn't mean I'm gonna take it easy on you, you hear? Izuku just laughed. I'd be insulted if you did. Chapter 22, Breaking for Lunch. Hitachi sat down at the table, trying not to stare at his classmates, maybe friends, unclear which. Midoriya was shoving katsudon in his face like he was going to die if he didn't eat it. Which was probably correct. Similarly, Uraraka was also shoving food in her face, but less rabid raccoon who hasn't eaten in months and more track athlete who just finished a marathon. Aitsu was eating at a relatively calmer pace to the other two, still fast but less messy, and Hatsum had a robot feeding her while she went over her machines. He started shoving food in his face, trying to still be neat about it. He wasn't going full feral animal like Midoriya. First there was a break for lunch, and then there were gonna be recreational games. He was going to use the time to prepare himself for his fights. What are you guys going to do during the games? Uraraka asked, having picked her bowl clean. Hitachi shrugged. Probably gonna prepare for my match. I'll be visiting Eri up in the stands, Midoriya said between bites of food. He'd finished his first bowl, and had moved on to a second bowl. She's watching with the Bakugos. Before Aitsu could respond, the electric kid and the kid with the grape orbs on his head came over. He didn't like the look on Grape Kid's face, especially since their table was near the other tables with other girls from Class 1A. Aizawa-sensei wanted the girls to wear cheerleader outfits for the recreational games. Grape Kid said. Yeah, something about school pride and showing solidarity with the other classes. Electric Kid nodded. Hitachi and Midoriya looked at each other as the other girls hesitantly started to nod. I mean, if he asked Yayorozu said, before being cut off by Hitachi. That doesn't sound like Aizawa-sensei. He could see Grape Boy sweating as Electric Kid just looked confused. Midoriya looked like he was about to plan a murder as he stood up, glaring at Grape Kid. Did Aizawa-sensei actually ask you to do this? He asked, but there was a weird undertone to his voice. Hitachi just chalked it up to him being pissed. No, the Grape Boy responded immediately, before slapping his hands over his mouth. Protest broke out immediately. Electric Boy gasped, turning to Grape Boy. Seriously dude? What the hell? All the girls expressed disgust and anger, and Uraraka stood up, what almost looked like murder in her eyes. She stomped over to Grape Kid, grabbing him and making him float with her quirk. Let's go talk to Aizawa-sensei. As the girls stormed off, Midoriya stood up. I'm gonna go make sure they don't murder anyone, he said, swiftly following them. Hitachi and Aitsu looked at each other, then Hitachi stood up. I'm gonna go make sure Midoriya really doesn't kill anyone. With the testimony of practically half of 1A and 2 kids from Gen Ed, Mineta was expelled on the spot. Hitachi swore he could hear a muffled fucking finally from his law and ethics teacher, but he didn't look too far into things as Yamada-sensei dragged the little pervert off. Thank you for telling me about this, Aizawa-sensei said, looking over the assembled collection of students. You lot go back to lunch, you need all the calories you can get. There was a collection of yes sensei from everyone, and Hitachi made his way over to Midoriya and Uraraka, who thankfully looked a little less murderous. Uraraka was complaining about Grape Kid. Yes, he knew his name now, but he wasn't obligated to use it, and Midoriya was listening, interjecting on occasion. Thank Kami he's gone. Uraraka exclaimed. Seriously, he complained so much about the girls' costume changes, saying we're less attractive and beautiful. Gross. Disgusting, Midoriya nodded along. Pathetic, Hitachi added, sliding in next to them. The other girls came up to them, individually thanking Midoriya for calling Grape Kid out on his shit. He started flushing red, as he tried to brush off their thanks as just something anyone would do. Which yeah, Hitachi did also call him out, but Midoriya was the one who scared the kid shitless. How did you do it? Hitachi signed, still not fully comfortable with asking questions verbally, especially around so many unknown people. Do what? Midoriya asked. Hitachi rolled his eyes. Get Grape Boy to talk. Midoriya shrugged, and said with a wink, trade secret. Alright then, keep your secrets. Hitachi shoved the other boy. He chuckled, shimmying his way outside the circle a little. I've gotta go to the bathroom. Bye guys. Bye. Goodbye. Thanks again, Mito. All the girls rounded on him, and Hitachi gulped. Damn it Midoriya. Izuku slipped out of the bathroom, having taken his meds with the sink water. Not the most pleasant way to take medication, but it was better than dry swallowing it. His hands were shaking as he slipped out to a maintenance tunnel, and he pulled out one of his vapes to blow. Telltale signs of a nicotine addiction, kid, 3 said at the back of his mind. He scowled, taking a long drag and pushing that back. Yeah, that was a new thing. A week ago, the past one for all holders decided to speak in his mind. It was only every once in a while, and only a passing thought, but it was still a new development. Was he going to tell Yagi about it? Fuck no. His hands stopped trembling as badly, they never really stopped shaking, and he relaxed as the smoke filled his lungs. He let it out with a long sigh, feeling tension leave his shoulders as he closed his eyes. Was this a good way of coping with his problems? Probably not. Was he going to stop? No. He felt the ice-cold and burning heat of an elemental quirk approach him, and he kept his stance open and relaxed as he opened one eye. When he saw Todoroki lean on the other side of the wall, he hummed, closing his eyes and taking another draw. I don't think you're allowed to do that on school grounds, Todoroki said blandly. Izuku shrugged with one arm, letting the smoke drift out of his mouth. All eyes are on the hero course, maybe the support course. No one cares if a Gen Ed kid vapes in a back hallway, away from prying eyes. That was meant to be a lead into an answer from Todoroki, about why he's snooping around maintenance tunnels instead of preparing for the finals. Instead, what comes out of his mouth is, I don't think All Might would approve of his son vaping. Izuku started hacking, caught off guard. He quickly caught his footing, making his posture still appear relaxed while ready to pick fight or flight. With all due respect, what the fuck? Yours and All Might's quirks are similar, and you've been getting favoritism from Nezu-san and secret training with All Might despite being in Gen Ed. Todoroki narrowed his eyes. I didn't think All Might's son would be someone so crass, but if you're a secret love child, then I suppose the rules would be looser for you. He is not my father. Izuku was still wheezing a little bit. I am not a secret love child. My sister isn't related to him either. Regardless, you made me break my pledge. You're what? And that's how Todoroki ended up telling him the story of his family. Of how his father used a quirk marriage to create him and his siblings, and tried to craft each of them to be the #1 hero to surpass All Might. The abuse got so bad that his mother snapped and poured boiling water on his face. And to rub it in his father's face, he's decided he's going to accomplish this goal by only using his mother's ice. A part of Izuku wondered if this is what he would have become if he hadn't escaped All for One's clutches. Then he remembered that he didn't have time to spiral into an existential crisis, put the implications of Todoroki no Shouto's story into a box, and shoved it into the back of his brain. That's why I have to beat you. I'll beat the son of the #1 hero dash. Still not his son. And prove that I don't need my father's fire. Izuku sighed, taking another drag of his vape and letting his mind process a little. Shouto was tense in front of him, as if he was waiting for some sort of verdict. Shouto, can I call you Shouto? The other boy nodded hesitantly, a hint of confusion showing on his face. Can I tell you something? A secret for a secret. Shouto gestured for him to continue. Izuku tucked the collar of the sports uniform jacket away from the side of his neck, revealing the long scar that went from halfway down the right side of his neck down underneath his jacket. I was homeless for a while. It was me and my sister on the streets, and we only had each other, before our uncle took us in. I got this during that time. He could see Shouto suck in a breath. Izuku released his collar, taking another drag. Some idiot thought it would be a good idea to mug 2 kids for drug money. He had a knife, and when I insisted that we didn't have anything worth shit on us, he decided that I was lying, and he'll take anything of worth off of my corpse. He closed his eyes and took another drag, settling his nerves as he pulled open old wounds. Even if he was telling a warped version of events, it still hurt. If I hadn't used my quirk, I wouldn't be here right now. I'm lucky that I only got away with this scar, and that Eri was unharmed. As for the other guy, well, he wasn't so lucky. He opened his eyes, seeing the thinly veiled horror on Xiaodo's face. My point is, outside UA, you won't have the luxury of only using half of your quirk. You either give it your all, or you and whoever you're protecting dies. The vape was empty, so he stuffed the empty cartridge back into his pocket. If we face each other, I'm not going to hold back. You shouldn't either. Izuku turned around, heading back to the stands where the Bakugos were waiting. As he was leaving, he caught a glimpse of Xiaodo looking at his hands. Katsuki turned around, sneaking back to the prep room. He's heard enough. There were a few big questions on his mind, but the biggest was, since when the fuck did Izuku have an uncle? Izuku gave Eri a kiss and headed back to the prep room that he shared with Shinsu and Hatsum. They're sharing because there aren't enough people who made it through both 1C and 1H to justify them having their own prep rooms. As he went, he heard Yamada-sensei announcing over the intercoms. With a smile, he pulled out his phone to check the next matches. Hatsum vs Midoriya. Todoroki vs Ashido. Ajura vs Monoma. Shinsu vs Kaminari. Uraraka vs Itza. Shiozaka vs Momo. Bakuga vs Tokoyami. Kirishima vs Tetsu. Izuku looked up, meeting Hatsum's gaze and grinning widely. This was going to be fun. Chapter 23, Round 1, Fight. Eri watched from the stands, sitting in Auntie's lap while she watched her brother down below on the platform. Him and Hashin had split a variety of contraptions between them, stuff more complicated than her brother made. They were all probably Hashin's babies. They pranced around the arena, shouting joyfully about Hashin's babies while they demonstrated them. They were having a lot of fun. They had hijacked the broadcast system, using it to promote the inventions. Auntie complained about them acting like used car salesmen in front of an audience, but Uncle laughed at their antics. She wondered what was wrong with being a used car salesman. After about 5 minutes, they had demonstrated everything, and both of them bowed as Hashin walked out of bounds. Midnight Sun declared Izunaiken the winner. Auntie, why did Hashin walk out? Eri asked, tugging on the sleeve of her sweater. Auntie was a busyness woman, so she would know. Her aunt chuckled, readjusting her hat. Well, Hatsum has already made her point to the audience and to any investors watching from the stands. She's made her pitch, she doesn't need to get any further in the festival. Izu-chan needs to win in order to transfer. They probably made a deal behind the scenes. Eri nodded. That sounded just like her brother. He was very smart. She watched as Izunaiken waved to the stands, and Eri waved back with a wide grin. Her brother was the best. He'll win for sure. Todoroki v Ashido. Continuing the theme of being too much, Todoroki has completely encased poor Ashido in ice. She made a valiant effort to free herself using her acid, but after a minute of struggle, Kayama-sensei gave the win to Todoroki. I feel bad for her, but that was pretty hot. Ajura v Monoma. Ajuro's martial skill is impressive and nothing to sneeze at. He lasted a good 3 minutes. However, Monoma's prep planning was what gave him the win. It also seems like Class 1B is continuing to cooperate with their classmates in the finals. I recognized all the quirks that Monoma used as coming from 1B. It's an impressive strategy. The matchup just wasn't the best for Ajuro, honestly. I hope some heroes still notice his effort. Shinsu v Kaminari. I'm so proud of Shinsu. He's really embracing the strategy of confusing the fuck out of people. He made a hand signal and then said a really terrible knock-knock joke. Kaminari was out of bounds in an instant. Normally I would feel bad for Kaminari, but Shinsu needs the W just as much as I do. Also, I'm pretty sure that Kaminari asked for Shinsu's number and kept flirting with him, so I don't feel as bad. Update: Kaminari definitely asked Shinsu on a date. They're going to a cat cafe. I'm happy for them, and Kaken owes me 1,000 yen. Uraraka v Itza. I'm surprised. Uraraka won. She played it smart, dodged, and managed to get in the hit that caused Izuku to float. His own momentum did him in. It isn't like him to get in his own head though. I'm going to go check on him. I hope he's alright. Izuku frowned, closing his notebook and slipping it in his pocket, sticking his pen in his hair. Hopefully he doesn't lose it, he's lost a few pens to his hair. He stood up. Tell me how the next match goes, alright. Shinsu raised his eyebrows. What's up? Izuku's acting weird. I'm going to make sure he's okay. Shinsu shrugged, waving him off. Get me a Gatorade. Rolling his eyes at his friend's antics, he slipped out of the bleachers. He was familiar with the winding hallways of the stadium, so he didn't waste any time at all in getting to Class 1A's dressing room. He knocked gently on the door, and at the quiet come-in he entered. Izuku was leaning against the table, his head in his hands. His phone was laying next to him on the table. He looked up for a moment, then put his head back in his hands. Hello, Midoriya. Izuku frowned, taking the seat next to him. Hey Izuku. Are you okay? Izuku sighed. My brother is in the hospital. They don't know what happened. He's still in surgery. Izuku looked over to his phone. I'm worried about him. Izuku scooted closer, pulling Izuku into a hug. He imagined Eri sitting there, worried about him on patrol, but quickly pushed the visual aside. I'm sure he'll pull through, Izuku. He's a good hero, and he wouldn't leave you like that. Izuku hunched in on himself. How would you know that, Midoriya? You don't know him. You're right, I don't. But I'm an older brother myself. I know I'd do anything to stay by Eri's side, and keep her safe and happy. I imagine your brother feels the same way, Izuku. They fell into silence, and after a few moments, Izuku hugged him back. They stayed like that for a few minutes, Izuku quietly soaking up comfort and Izuku gladly giving it to him, before Izuku pulled away. My mother is coming to pick me up, he said, adjusting his glasses. Izuku didn't call him out on the tears. Since I've been eliminated, I'll be going to the hospital. I need to be there for him. Izuku nodded. I understand. Do you want me to walk with you? Izuku looked at him, a little surprised. But I know you take pride in your analysis, and that you were excited to watch the festival in person. Izuku cut him off. I can rewatch the festival later. This is more important. Izuku stayed quiet, probably thinking about something, so Izuku stood up and helped him to his feet. Where are you being picked up? I'll walk with you. I don't want to keep you any longer than I have already. Don't worry about it, Izuku. You're my friend. Izuku grabbed his arm, humming a tune under his breath as he started walking. It was worth it when he saw Izuku smile. They'll be okay. Izuku slid back in his seat, in the middle of a match. A quick glance saw that Kiken was fighting Tokoyami. Who won the last one, he muttered to Shinsu. Girl with vines for hair, Shinsu muttered back. Izuku frowned, Yaoyorozu was objectively stronger and smarter. He's gonna have to go back and watch the replay. He pulled out his notebook, then struggled to find his pen. Shinsu rolled his eyes, plucking a pen out of Izuku's hair and handing it to him. With a quiet thanks, Izuku started working on Kiken and Tokoyami's match. Kiken v Tokoyami. It's a bad matchup. Explosions create a lot of light, a weakness of dark shadow. To be fair, Tokoyami is trying his best. The fact that he lasted this long shows how smart Dark Shadow and Tokoyami are together. Which makes sense, two brains are smarter than one. Shinsu has informed me that this is not always the case because me and Kiken have two brains but get dumber when put together. Note to self experimentally test this. Shinsu just called me a nerd. I have no rebuttal. Kiken's playing it smart too. He's using smaller explosions, which seems to be a detriment to the match. I know for a fact one big explosion could have ended this match about 2 minutes ago, but he seems to be accounting for future matches. It wouldn't do him any good if he's immediately knocked out right after this round. And Kiken just grabbed Tokoyami's arm and threw him out of bounds. I forgot just how muscular he was, that was really hot. Shinsu called me a simp. I have no rebuttal for this either. This is really going to be a matter of brains, Izuku muttered, scribbling in his notebook as Kirishima of 1A and Tetsu of 1B entered the arena. They have essentially the same quirk, so it's going to be a matter of who is smart enough to use their quirk creatively. What do you think, Shinsu? The other boy shrugged, sipping on his Gatorade. Kayama-sensei cracked the whip, and Izuku leaned forwards, anticipating a great match of wits. He was sorely disappointed as they both went for the obvious strategy of wearing each other out. This is gonna take forever. Izuku whined. Shinsu raised an eyebrow. If this goes longer than 10 minutes, you owe me a pack of Choco Cats. You're on. Izuku doubted that the school would let them fight for more than 10 minutes. His bet was on 5 being the cap. They decided the winner based on an arm wrestling competition. Izuku was the proud owner of a bag of Choco Cats. Chapter 24, Round 2, Fight. My point is, outside UA, you won't have the luxury of only using half of your quirk. You either give it your all, or you and whoever you're protecting dies. Shouto scowled in the training room, the air in the room growing colder by the minute. His classmates were up in the stands, so he was alone in the room. He was trying to meditate, clear his mind in preparation for the battle ahead, but all he was doing was turning the conversation with Midoriya over in his head. If we face each other, I'm not going to hold back. You shouldn't either. Shouto wasn't going to let anyone break his pledge, even if it was All Might's son. No, he was the son of Endeavor, and he was going to prove to his father that he doesn't need him or his flames to be a top hero. Izuku had his top secret trademark notebook open, the pages on his list of quirks. He couldn't go all out on Shouto, not if he wanted to keep all of his secrets, but it would be unfair of him to yell at Shouto that he needed to go all out and not go all out himself. So, he made a compromise to himself. Compromises were what Eri was learning about the week or so before the sports festival, and sometimes you just need to go back to the ideas of kindergarten. He would go as all out as he can without blowing his cover. That means he needs to make a list of all the quirks he can and can't use in the fight. Hence the blank page with only the names of the quirks he has written down. All for one, sensing purposes only. Attraction of small objects, for redirecting ice spikes, be very careful. Boost. Resistance. Confession, use sparingly. One for all. Shock absorption. 7 out of 12 quirks is still the majority of his quirks, counting the 2 he's using sparingly and carefully. This isn't just about winning the sports festival anymore. It's about helping Shouto. It's about the fact that he sees a reflection of himself in Shouto, the version of him that stayed with All for One. And despite everything, he's a hero at heart, and he can't just leave Shouto alone. He has to save him. Izuku stood in the arena, steadying his breathing as he stood across from Shouto. The arena was already cold. He steadied his grip on One for All, feeling the warmth in his chest from the quirk and letting it fill him. He grinned across from the stadium, and Shouto only scowled at him. Midnight cracked the whip. Begin. Izuku jumped up, dodging the aggressive volley of ice sent his way. He activated One for All at 5%, the familiar lightning sparking around him. He tuned out Yamada-sensei's commentary, subtly redirecting the shards of ice as he dodged another ice volley. Izuku landed on the ice, only perched there for a moment before dodging another volley. He's not going to get anywhere if he's just dodging. He needed to stop thinking of this like Izuku and more like Kitsune. A part of Izuku realized that this was a bad idea, that he was shooting himself in the foot later, and that Izuku's life and Kitsune's life weren't supposed to intertwine like this. But a much larger part was high on the adrenaline of the fight and the nicotine in his system, and Shouto was not going to be another name on the list of people he's failed. He ducked behind one of the volleys, taking a few breaths in as he switched mindsets. Sorry Shouto, but this is for your own good, Kitsune muttered, before sliding back out. It was another volley of ice, and instead of dodging, Kitsune roundhouse kicked, shattering the ice. You know, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting it to do something different. Shouto's eyes were wider, before he scowled again, sending another wave of ice out. Once again, Kitsune kicked, using attraction of small objects to make sure the ice didn't nick him. Did my father put you up to this? Shouto shouted back. Kitsune barked out a laugh. I'd rather die than accept money from that bastard. There was an opening, so he launched himself forwards and aimed a punch. Shouto sent out a volley of ice at the last second, so he redirected into a slap that shattered the ice and sent him flying back a meter. Shouto was also pushed back closer to the edge, but he had braced himself with ice. Then why? Shouto asked. Why are you doing this? Kitsune dodged the ice again, lunging forwards and managing to get a good hit in, fist hitting Shoto square in the jaw. Because your attitude is going to get someone killed. He launched into a backspring as he dodged the ice coming for his face. He could tell that Shoto was starting to shiver, starting to succumb to hypothermia from overusing only one half of his quirk. You're going to get hypothermia, Shoto, Kitsune called out, shattering a small volley of ice. And your ice is getting weaker. Of course, that's not an issue if you just used your fire. He flicked a finger and shattered apart the ice, that's how small these volleys were getting. In fact, the arena is so cold that you could end this right now. One spark would be enough to light up an explosion. A beautiful fireball. Shoto scrunched his eyebrows, confusion showing plain on his face. Kitsune smiled, he was much prettier when he actually expressed his emotions. Why are you telling me this? Kitsune smirked, something a little too close to crazed, his own version of Eraserdad's smile. Probably because he bounced the line between thrill-chasing danger seeker and suicidal maniac like a tightrope acrobat, Dabi's words, not his. Probably because despite his trauma, fire ran through his veins, and he always lit up whenever he set a trash can full of Endeavor merch on fire with his friends. Probably because Shoto was a little too close to who Kitsune could have been, and he wanted to push him to the light. What he actually said was because your fire is too pretty to be wasted by locking it up. He just barely managed to dodge the ice coming for him. I'm not going to use his fire. And there was the root of the issue. Do you truly believe that? Kitsune asked, lacing confession in his voice. Yes, came the immediate response. No hesitation, not in the slightest, not even after Shoto realized what he just said. There was a lull in the battle. Kitsune and Shoto stood across from each other. There were a million things he could say, all of them touching on things a little too close to home. What he settled on was, so am I a villain then? Shoto blinked. What? I'm blacklisted from the hero course because I'm related to a villain. I have a quirk similar to his. Even if I never used it for evil, that didn't matter to the HPSC. Kitsune shrugged. That's not the only reason he was blacklisted, but Shoto didn't need to know that. So am I a villain? Of course not. Shoto's immediate response kicked in, before he paused and thought about it. My quirk is not his, it's mine. Your quirk is not Endeavor's, it's yours, Shoto. Kitsune activated shock absorption, letting it settle on his skin as he watched Shoto. His eyes lit up as fire engulfed the boy's right side. It was the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen, well, third most, all for one's compound in flames and Eri were always gonna take second and first respectively. Beautiful, he muttered, before everything went white. Izuku groaned, opening his eyes for a moment before shutting them against the harsh white lights. His entire body throbbed, and he distantly realized that he had ice pressed against his chest. Hopefully he didn't re-break his ribs. Although hoping never got him very far. Midoriya. Izuku. Broccoli-kun. His two very loud friends and his quieter friend were sitting next to his bed. Ow. Yeah, no shit. Kaken shouted. What the fuck was that about, huh? Where did that talk about winning go? And why the fuck would you just stand there when he was about to explode the entire stadium? Izuku shrugged lopsidedly, being mindful of Kaken's death grip on his left arm. It was pretty. So you almost died because Icy Hot's fire was pretty? Yeah. There was a pause, and then Izuku said, do you think he's single? That earned him a smack. Stop smacking my patience. Recovery Girl came out of nowhere and beamed Kaken upside the head with her cane. Izuku winced in sympathy while Kaken seated, muttering something about old hags under his breath. Izuku tried for a smile, but he quickly cowed under a cane being aimed in his face. And you? You came in broken ribs, ribs that were rebroken, which means they were broken in the past, and then you come in with the worst heart rate I've ever seen in a student. He could feel Kaken staring into his soul. Oops. Recovery Girl sighed, pinching her nose. I have half a mind to make you heal naturally, young man. However, you seem to have plenty of energy, as your friend here informed me about the amount of caffeine you had this morning, so I will heal you and you can go back to the stands to watch the rest of the festival. But you better come in on Monday for a follow-up. Yes ma'am, Izuku gave her a single-handed salute, and then she kissed her forehead. He tried to hop out of bed, but stumbled and had to be caught by Kaken, He absolutely didn't turn red when he brushed his friend's arms. Shut up, Shinsu. Recovery girl simply rolled her eyes and muttered under her breath something about teenagers before shooing them out of the infirmary. Shinsu, shouldn't you be preparing for your match? Izuku asked. He shook his head. I won already. You did. Izuku's eyes widened. How? You've got to tell me everything. Don't worry, Broccoli-kun, I've been recording the whole festival with one of my babies, Hatsum said. I'll send you the footage. That's it, you're my new best friend. Hey. Kaken smacked him again. Uraraka's match is currently going on, Shinsu said. If you hurry you could make it. Izuku's eyes went even wider, and he slung his arm over Hatsum's shoulder. To the stands. I can't miss this. Shinsu v Monoma. Shinsu's a big meanie who won't tell me how he won, sad face. Uraraka v Shiozaki. Uraraka kicked ass. She's getting really good at removing her own gravity and dealing with the nausea. She's smarter than she thinks. She dodged and managed to trap Shiozaki in her own vines. Note to self, Eri wants to be babysat by Yura-chan. Kaken v Kirishima. This was an amazing fight. Kaken and Kirishima have been sparring with each other for the past few weeks, so it's really a battle of an unstoppable force vs an immovable object. And they know each other so well that they could anticipate each other's moves, so it really comes down to who's smarter. My theoretical money's on Kaken. He's one of the top of his class in academics. And Kirishima's a pretty good guy, but I'm rooting for him. Go Kaken. Izuku didn't stand up, but he did grin and cheer as Eri jumped up and down next to him. Kaken threw Kirishima over his shoulder and over the boundary line. Kaken. 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 Eri shouted, jumping with each word and flailing her arms up and down. From the arena, he looked up to about where they were sitting, grinning and giving the stands a wave. Izuku laughed as Eri waved enthusiastically back, and then full-on wheezed when Kaken dabbed on the stadium as he was leaving. Izu-chan, are you alright? Uncle Masaru asked, patting him on the back. Izuku was still coughing, his sides protesting from the violent laughter, but it was 100% worth it. I'm fine, I'm fine. Izuku-Kaken. I fucking did it. I am dying Kaken. I can't breathe. You better be able to breathe. Pay up fucker. Image ID, the picture is in the UA Sports Festival stands, a thumb covering one corner of the picture. Izuku is slumped over the banister, grabbing his sides. He was laughing so hard that there were tears in his eyes. Hi Kaken, laughing face, hello unicorn, how are you doing? I'm doing good, smiley face, you were so awesome. Thank you. Can you make sure your brother isn't dying? Okay. Is Kaken using correct grammar plus punctuation? Shut up shitty nerd, I'm setting a good example for the unicorn. Alright, that's where we'll leave off for the day. Thanks so much for listening along with me today. If you enjoyed, please like and comment down below. It really helps with the algorithms. I look forward to seeing you next time. Ciao for now, lovelies.